Welcome to POSTCAST. David Locke along with Ron Boone as the Utah Jazz get blown out for the second straight game. This time, it's the story of the Cavaliers' defense. Donovan will get the headlines for the return, but the second-best defense in the NBA proves to be as difficult for the Jazz as the number one defense in the NBA was. We're talking about it coming up on POSTCAST. David Locke along with Ron Boone. And Ron, for the second straight game, the Jazz play an elite defense. Number one, Bucks last time out. Number two, Cleveland. And they just dislodged the Jazz offense. The Jazz, the numbers tonight, pretty stark. Going through three quarters, the Jazz offensive rating was a 95. At halftime, their offensive rating was an 82. Here's the really stunning number. At halftime, the Jazz offensive rating, the Jazz were down 18 at halftime. The game was kind of over. The offensive rating in the half court for the Jazz was a 56.7. They were averaging 0.5 points per half-court possession in the first half of this game. We'll find other things to talk about, but the story tonight is that the Jazz could not handle the number two defense in the NBA.
They really couldn't, and they were forced to shoot a lot of threes, 5 for 20, I think, in that first half, which is the Jazz want to shoot a lot of threes, but they were not the threes that they're used to getting. I mean, those uncomfortable threes, the ones that without a hand in their face, that type of thing. And just didn't have an inside game. The defense was awfully good, but I also thought that the Jazz offense was suspect.
So the first part about that was obvious. If we have this great broadcast site here in Cleveland, is the Jazz routes, all the things we've seen, their handoffs, their off-ball screening. This was the first thing. Actually, I asked you a little while ago, like, why aren't people top-blocking the Jazz? And they top-blocked the heck out of the Jazz. And the Jazz couldn't get through the top blocks. And the routes were all different. And guys were coming through the lane and where they should be cutting at about like 8 feet out the lane. By the time their cut was done, they were 14 or 15 feet away from the basket. They just got physically taken off their routes.
And without Kelly Olynyk, and the offense was not as good in the paint. And I say that because Kessler is not one they have to worry about shooting from the perimeter. He doesn't play well without the basketball to where he's cutting to the basket. He's working on those things. We're watching before the ball games, working with players. Now, Vanderbilt is not a scorer in the paint there as well. I mean, those little runners, those little 5-footers, those type of things like that, all you got to do is they were just getting a hand in his face, and he couldn't score. Marketing was the only frontline player that was actually getting it done. So that defense of the Cavaliers really took the Jazz out of everything that they wanted to do with their frontline players. But the fact that those frontline players couldn't get any offense going was probably
you bring up a really excellent point, that particularly when you have Vanderbilt and Kessler on the floor together, which is how the Jazz started the game tonight. You have two guys that can't space the floor at all.
Correct.
I am not. I was talking to the great Cavaliers broadcaster Jim Jones before the game. I don't know if he's got his headphones on, so he's not listening to me, but he should have been before the game. Hopefully he was, because I said to him, hey, we're really in trouble tonight without Kelly Olynyk. We got two guys that are the thread that hold this fabric together. They're Mike Conley and Kelly Olynyk. They're the ball movers, and without Olynyk, the ball's not going to move the same way. He's been really vital to us all season long. So I'd say color me not surprised at all that the lack of Kelly Olynyk kind of disrupted our whole offensive sequence.
Without a doubt. And you could see it. It was awfully good, even the back cuts. And their offense is similar to the Jazz, I think, off the ball, because there is movement. You just watch Allen get the basketball. He turns and looks weak side a lot, looking for that cutter or maybe that back screen or something like that to get some points in the paint. And they had a tremendous night in the paint, 50 points in the paint, and a lot of those came in the first half. But this is a very good basketball team, very good shooting basketball team for sure.
The reason I stem this back to their defense almost entirely is because the second part of the story is the amount of time they spent in transition tonight, as the Cavaliers ended up in transition 19.2% of the time tonight, which is incredibly high. This is a team that on the season is only in transition 13% of the time, and instead they were in transition 19% of the game tonight. That's an alarming difference, and that is because their defense created so many opportunities for their offense.
Yeah, anytime you have a team that has a very good offense and their defense is creating opportunities for them, that's a team that can go a long ways. Not sure about how much they can protect the rim against some pretty good frontline players, but you can see that they had it against the Jazz.
It did seem that Jared Allen and Brook Lopez have both caused the Jazz a lot of problems to have that guy. Rudy Gobert did it to him, frankly, too.
Yeah.
That you get a big 7-footer and sit him in front of the rim, and some of the Jazz drive game does not feel like it has the same thing that they have had at other times this season. Maybe that's a little lacking of Colin Sexton, who's pretty fearless going to the rim in the personnel, but that does seem an area. What's interesting to me is, like, so I guess the question has to be, like, what lacks on the Jazz offense when they play these really elite level defensive teams? Because one thing that was interesting is, one of the things I would always say to this, and this is, I said this at the beginning of the season, is where you're going to miss Donovan is when someone's really D'ing you up, you just don't have the guy who can go get it. You know, frankly, Lauri Markkanen was pretty darn close to being the guy to go get it tonight. Like, he put up 24 points on 12 shot attempts, was pretty remarkable. Some of the threes he hit a pull-up jumper. I mean, he made a bunch of plays tonight that were pretty awesome in going to go get it. And Jordan Clarkson's the other guy who went to try to go get it. He went 8 of 21, wasn't nearly as efficient, but then nobody else contributed offensively.
Yeah, and especially the bench. The Jazz bench just couldn't provide anything here tonight. I know there were some low numbers.
They were 4 of 24 through 3 quarters.
Yeah, see, that's not the strength of this team has been the bench, I think. And I know that Markkanen has had a great year so far. Kelly Olynyk is shooting the three very, very well. And Jordan Clarkson, who's kind of up and down so far in the early part of this year. But the bench, for the most part, has been the one that's really made this team go so far.
Interesting question here from Landon. He says, hey, Markkanen only gets 3 shots in the second half. They should give him the ball more. This is what's super interesting about the way the Jazz play. This has happened a few times this year with Lowry, where he has these big first halves. He's actually gone over 23 times, by the way, in the first half of games this year. It's actually the same amount he had in his entire career before he joined the Jazz. But then he doesn't get it much in the second half. And Will Hardy's kind of danced between these two things. He's, in one sense, said, hey, we don't play a style in which we just go isolate a guy in one spot and go give him the ball.
Right.
And then the other end, he said, but our guys have got to be aware who's hot and who's scoring, and they need to get him the ball.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So you can't really say that it's anyone's fault that he doesn't get the ball more or doesn't get a chance to, shoot the basketball more, or they don't go to him more. So you really can't say because of the nature of this offense, the way they played all season long. But I totally get it. Conley is one of those guys that probably will get him the basketball, that type of thing. But, you're looking at a guy that gets, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, I think it's only like 14 shots a game, and I think Clarkson's averaging 16. Beasley might be averaging 12. I just can't remember all of those numbers, but I know I'm pretty close.
You're pretty
to where
close.
those
You're right on it.
Right.
Malik Beasley, just a weird night, was 1 of 9. His only 3 he made, he banked in.
Yeah.
And his first 2 were so far off what we're used to seeing out of him. You, knew something was wrong, and then it just stayed wrong all night long. It was really a strange night for him.
Well, I know shooters have nights like that, but when you're a shooter, and I think he is a shooter, you just don't miss that far off, You like guys that when they miss, it's not far. I mean, they barely miss, that type of thing, because they're pretty much on line. But tonight, it was that wasn't pretty at all. I'm sorry.
It was really weird, actually. Worth mentioning. That's why we brought it up.
Yeah.
All right, time for our 2 stars.
Very easy.
Lauri Markkanen, unquestionable star. He was really great. 24 points, 6 rebounds, an assist, 2 steals. He's gone over 3 times this year in the first half of games. As I mentioned, he's only done it 6 times in his career, and they were tough looks. I mean, he had one where he went one-on-one with Evan Mobley and pulled from on the aggressiveness of a hard drive. He had another on a fast break where he went coast to coast at 94 feet and at full throttle. He was really great.
He was absolutely marvelous in 32 minutes of play. But as the caller was, the commenter was asking, with only 12 shots, yeah, probably would like to see him be able to get a few more shots. But he was the only spark plug tonight, and for the Jazz, and so that would be one of the stars. And I think the other one, I think you and I would agree to this, would be Kessler. He just continues to get better.
Walker Kessler had a really good third quarter tonight. Kind of the Jazz only got outscored by 1 in that quarter. He kind of held it together a little bit. He went 5 of 5. He had 11 points. He had 6 rebounds. He had a really good – this was a solid game for Walker Kessler tonight.
Yeah, he just continues to improve. And believe me, he'll get it sooner or later to where he doesn't get pushed around down there in the paint. the great thing about what he's doing is that he has such length that his arms are. I'm not sure what his wingspan is, but they're so long. And he had a couple of rebounds or a couple of attempts for rebounds over the back there of Jared Allen, who Jared Allen is 6'11" and jumps pretty well. But Kessler was able to go over the back and almost come up with rebounds.
The Donovan Mitchell side story, 23 points on 8 of 12 shooting. He was brilliant. He's been brilliant all year. He's legitimate MVP candidate. He looked totally in control. His shooting is as dialed in. We saw it numerous times when he was in Salt Lake, where his shooting is just dialed in, and you can't imagine he's ever going to miss, and that's how his shooting looks right
they
now.
started the night off at 20-11. Last year at this time, they were 19-12, so they're only one game ahead of last year's pace.
And then they had the injuries.
Absolutely.
They are plus 5.2, though. They are one of the legit teams in the NBA. They blow out the Jazz tonight. Final score, 122-99.